Come back! Wait! Francis!
Leave me alone! What was that thing? Why can't it leave the woods?
Can you keep a secret?
The third episode frames Derry as a place where fear isn't merely encountered, it's taught, traded, and then, decades later, pressed into service. The episode spans 1908 to 1962, braiding three aspects: a boy's first lesson in terror and the talisman that comes of it, a general's return to weaponize the source of that terror, and four kids who decide that if the adults won't help, they'll make a picture the town cannot ignore. It also hints at the nexus point of its identity as Pennywise the Dancing Clown, when the entity chose to take on the appearance of a clown, and why it is so effective. Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're breaking down It, Welcome to Derry, explaining what happens and the many Easter eggs littered throughout. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification icon to stay up to date on all the latest content, and click the like button to help appease the algorithm gods. Also, if you'd like to make a suggestion on what you want me to cover next, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments below. Before we get into the episode though, a quick refresher on what it actually is and how the creature operates. In Stephen King's novel, It is not born in Derry. Instead, the town is built around it. The creature, an extra-dimensional predator from the Macroverse, falls to prehistoric Earth in a cataclysmic impact and lies dormant for eons. When humans finally settle the region that becomes Derry, the presence of a dense, ever-renewing food source rouses it into a repeating rhythm. Wake, hunt, gorge on terror and flesh, preferably children whose fears are simpler and saltier, then hibernate. The first human to acknowledge it is seen in a painting glimpsed in Chapter 1 as being a woman who willfully handed over her baby to the creature in the well. The well was built on the crater where it arrived, and the town was built around that source of water. That well is also seen in the house on Nybald Street later in the films. The pattern runs on a roughly 27-year interval. Each cycle begins with a spark of communal cruelty or catastrophe and ends in an explosion of violence that lets the town reset itself. Derry's institutions, police, press, city fathers are not merely negligent, they're sedated by its influence, which fosters apathy towards suffering and an eagerness to paper over atrocities. The town's history, told through Mike Hanlon's interludes, reads like a seismograph of these feedings. The Easter Sunday explosion at the Kitchener Ironworks that ranged children's bodies on their parents. The Bradley Gang Massacre, in which townspeople stage a noonday ambush and then collectively forget. The burning of the Black Spot, and in the novel's present-past strand, a string of child killings that begins with 6-year-old Georgie. 27 years later, Mike's calls reawaken the adult losers because the pattern has returned, proof that the creature survived their first victory, and the town's denial has resumed.
It's the only way. If we want this ritual to work,
we have to remember.
This cyclical horror is tied to how it hunts and how Derry responds. It is a shapeshifter whose true form cannot be apprehended in human terms. When the losers force a confrontation, they perceive a titanic spider because their minds must translate a lethal, sanity-shredding radiance, its deadlights, into a survivable image. Day to day, it selects a mask that either 1. Amplifies the individual child's worst fear, werewolf, mummy, leper, or 2. Neutralizes a child's instincts long enough to get close. That second tactic explains the recurring guise that becomes synonymous with a monster, Pennywise the Dancing Clown. In mid-century America, clowns are bright invitations, parade-friendly, circus-adjacent, the opposite of stranger danger. Children step toward balloons and smiles. Adults who glimpse a clown in a gutter rationalize it as a prank or an advertising stunt. The Bob Gray Pennywise persona is thus perfect camouflage for a predator whose greatest ally is adult denial, and in this episode we see hints as to what encouraged it to don this persona. King leans on this cultural grammar from the novel's opening. Little Georgie meets a clown among the rain and storm-drained talk of circuses and cotton candy, not a fanged apparition. The scene is so mundane it writes its own lie, only the bite reveals the truth. Why Derry? King suggests two answers. First, the creature's impact site and lair, deep beneath the town in a primordial warren of tunnels, make Derry concentric with it. History radiates from where it sleeps. Second, Derry is unusually soft in the moral sense. It's a place where the social fabric tears easily under pressure. The town's worst chapters are not anomalous crimes, they're communal expressions of rot. People gather with guns at high noon to execute the Bradleys. Citizens watch the black spot burn and do nothing. Adults refuse to see bullying, abuse, and missing children because seeing would require responsibility. Its influence energizes that rot and feeds on it in turn. The result is a feedback loop. The more it eats, the more Derry forgets. The more Derry forgets, the easier the next feast becomes. Against this are children, whose imaginations can both empower it by furnishing fear forms and wound it, because belief cuts both ways. The loser's slingshot is just a toy until their shared conviction charges it. Their hand-in-hand unity during the ritual of Chut, a psychic grapple of will and story, matters because it asserts a counter-reality where friendship and promise are stronger than spectacle and terror. As for the clown specifically, its strategy. Pennywise can stand in broad daylight at a parade, wave from a sewer, loiter at a fairground, and no one calls the police. Adults willfully misread the image because it fits a sanctioned category. It also harmonizes with Derry's carnival of cyclical amnesia. Fairs arrive, amaze, and vanish. Everyone goes home smiling, and no one talks about the missing kid. A clown's aesthetic, the primary colors, the helium balloons, the playful patter, lets it frame its entrance as entertainment, turning the threshold moment when the mask falls into a punchline of a joke only it understands. Episode 3, which begins in 1908 during a carnival, alludes to the notion that this might have been the point that it chooses the guise of Pennywise, with the images of a mysterious clown and a circus wagon that likely inspired the entity's most well-known guide.
Kid! Hey! Kid!
We open on a carnival, wooden rails, barkers angling their voices like knives, the air full of thrown baseballs and the shiver of hurled knives. A boy named Francis Shaw drifts toward a barker who clocks him instantly as the next mark and ushers him into the freak show tent. Inside, a menagerie that teeters between the merely human and the impossible. The Lee twins, conjoined figures whose link looks more like exposed viscera than scar tissue. A dog-faced boy, Slorak the man-ape, and the skeleton man, described as being more dead than alive. The oddities arranged with the same grotesque showmanship Stephen King writes about in his 1981 book Dance Macabre, and the sequence flirts with the idea that it is already tinting the edges. But the point here is that the carnival is doing what Derry always does. It teaches a child that fear is delicious, that you don't want to see it, and at the same time, you've got to see it. Tucked in the corner, the pianist is actually director Andy Muschietti himself. Francis lingers at the freak show's flap, inches forward on a Derry gives himself, and stares too long at the skeleton man in the tent's shadows, an emaciated, one-eyed old man whose face is a cratered eclipse. In a universe where the wrong thing sometimes wears a human mask, the show stages the right signal. There's no red balloon here, no clown yet, but we do see light coming in from holes in the tent that look suspiciously like Pennywise eyes, alluding to the notion that Pennywise is either here or watching his fear manifest. Francis stumbles out rattled, and his father does what fathers of that era do. He reframes fear as a moral failure. "Don't be a coward," he says. "Here, take this." This is a slingshot, won at a midway stall. The moment reads as parental reassurance, but the show is quietly soldering a connection that it fans know by heart. In this world, simple objects become talismans if belief gets poured through them. It should be noted that one of those knockdown targets in the carnival is a turtle. Maturin's shadow, creation's counterweight to it, keeps turning up in these years when Derry is teaching its children what to be. Not because the turtle will swoop in and save anyone, because the universe here keeps insisting that there are forces other than hunger at work. On the road home, fate gives the slingshot its first detour. The family's Model T coughs, hisses, and dies. License plate 6719 flashing long enough for constant readers to clock the Kingsverse's most haunted number, embedded in the last two digits. In King's Connected Universe, 19 isn't just a cute Easter egg, it's a kind of omen, one of those car signposts that tells you larger forces are lining up. Most plainly, 19 is the signature number of the Dark Tower cycle, King's backbone myth. Once Roland's quests intersect our world, 19 starts turning up everywhere, on clocks, receipts, phone numbers, street addresses, doorways, graffiti. Whenever fate, Ka, is nudging characters onto the beam, King treats it like a cosmic breadcrumb. See 19 and you're meant to feel the story's gears meshing across books. It's also tied to real-world fate. King was nearly killed by a van on June 19, 1999, a date he later folds back into the Tower meta-narrative as the crisis that forces the story to completion. From then on, 19 floods his fiction with renewed intensity. It's both an in-universe talisman and an authorial heartbeat. Beyond the Tower, King keeps threading 19 through standalones as a ward, key, or warning. In End from Just After Sunset, obsessive rituals hinge on 19 as the number that holds an otherworldly horror at bay, explicitly treating it like a protective counterspell. In The Dead Zone, 19 appears at a carnival game moment that presages Johnny Smith's life-bending accident, reinforcing the number's role as a hinge between chance and destiny.
Halloran!
As Francis Shaw's father works on the car, a pretty girl from a local native nation, Rose, sells him a bottle of water, and because he's short on coin, she takes a slingshot in trade. The exchange does more than meet a need. It moves a talisman to the hand that will use it. In King's numerology, 19 is a current that drags objects and people into the right hands at the right time. Here it shepherds a weapon from a boy trying to impress his father to a girl who will save his life with it, and decades later, draw a psychic straight into the belly of what Derry forgets. The show gives the barter an almost ritual weight, and their summer friendship is minted. That friendship becomes a shield in the next beat. Francis, Rose, and a few other children play in the field, and whatever the town will someday call the woods is, right now, their boundary. She tells him not to go in, but he does. What comes out of the trees to meet him is taller than a man and wrong at the joints, a horrific echo of the freak show figure at the tent. It is not yet a clown. It's the shape Fear reached for inside Francis that night and then learned how to wear. Then the form degenerates, now on all fours, skull-faced, needle-toothed, and charges. As Francis runs, the forest geometry bends in the way Derry landscapes do when it wants you to lose your way. A thread of belief and a small act of love snap the moment. Rose lifts the slingshot Francis traded away, stones the thing in the head, and knocks it off him. The detail that sells the metaphysic that something is wrong here. Blood beads drift upward, as if gravity itself doesn't apply to what she's hit. Lesson written in the body, it can be struck if a child believes it can be. Second lesson, written in the boundary line. Beyond the forest's border, it does not follow. The Elders' rule about the woods isn't superstition, it's a map. The sequence also highlights that the losers we later meet aren't unique because they're chosen, they're unique because they act. A slingshot and friendship are enough to interrupt whatever the thing in Derry is practicing out there among the pines. Francis admits he's leaving as his father's been reassigned. "Promise me you won't forget," he says, grasping for a child's contract against erosion. Rose answers with Derry physics. People who leave do forget. It's the loser's club law decades ahead of time. Outside the town limits, memory sands down for self-preservation, and you don't even notice what you lost. Cutting forward 54 years, the boy is now General Francis Shaw, back in Derry to find the entity and turn it into something the United States can point at their enemies.
Further away you get, the more it all just seems to fade.
Across town, Lily, who survived the Capitol Theatre and supermarket nightmares, is about to be discharged from Juniper Hill. She's moving between guilt, fury, and the numbness Derry prescribes to girls who see too much. Her dilemma is that revealing the truth about what she witnessed, which could free Hank, would lead to her readmittance back into the hospital, where doctors want to prescribe a more radical treatment to her episodes. But she's ultimately advised by one of the kind nurses that if Ronnie does truly mean that much to her, she needs to find a way to make it right.
You're the last person I need help from. You're lucky I don't whoop your ass for what you did to my dad.
Over at the police station, Hank Rogan sits in a cell he does not deserve. Chief Clint Bowers, ancestor of the boy who will one day carry a switchblade for it, leans on the bars and produces a discarded pack of Hank's imported European cigarettes to prove Hank wasn't home when he said he was.
You know what they do to kitty killers in Shawshank?
He says, letting the name do the work. The threat is not subtle. You'll be eaten alive in there, and I will make sure the paperwork says you asked for it. Even if you've never read Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, King Shawshank is cultural shorthand for a carceral meat grinder. The subtext, the town needs a human culprit so the adults can sleep and Hank will do. Shawshank is a story about what institutions do to bodies when they refuse to see souls. Invoking it here is the show's plain admission that Derry's human systems are as monstrous as anything in a sewer when they need to be useful to fear. Whether Hank is hiding an affair or simply can't explain where he was without blowing up his life, Bowers doesn't care. But unless Hank admits where he really was, his fate is sealed.
We're gonna miss you around here, Hank. At least we got the memories.
Wait.
This is America. You can't just throw people in jail for nothing.
We talking about the same country?
His daughter Ronnie, meanwhile, is having a rough go of it. Kids at school give her odd glances, and some have taken to writing, "Hatchet Hank's gonna fry" in what appears to be lipstick on her locker. Lily is back from her second stay at Juniper Hill and has turned fragility into a plan. Prove Hank's innocence by photographing the thing that actually did the killing. They converge on an idea that feels both childish and correct in a King story. If the adults refuse truth, show them proof. She makes her case to Ronnie, who doesn't so much agree as refuse to look away.
People only believe what they can see for themselves.
How are we supposed to get proof?
They realize they don't know a developer from a stop path, so they recruit Will, science-minded, telescope-owning, already falling for Ronnie in the way boys fall in dangerous towns, and Will brings Rich, a motor-mouthed middleman whose crush is parked firmly on Marge. Side note, Lily hands Ronnie a Van Helden bottle of rubbing alcohol to wash the red lipstick off her hands. Within its deeper lore, a little girl named Danielle Van Helden went missing in May 1961. And the bottle is the props department's quiet insistence that Derry is small enough that any object might have a story attached to it. Back at the dig, the military gives the kids the kind of help institutions specialize in. None. The exhumed car is logged to the Bradley Gang massacre, which means the base has learned enough Derry history to know this part of its 1935 cycle, and that one of the entity's forms, a clown, was spotted during the noonday shootout among the vigilantes. Precept calls the car a beacon, but what it really is a warning label. Every shovelful you pull out of Derry brings up a cycle you've seen before.
What we're looking for was buried in Derry 300 years before the automobile was even invented.
Eyewitness reports at the time suggest sightings of the entity in one of its forms.
With the dig not giving them the results they want, Shaw pivots and tries a different tool. If a relic can tune a man like a radio, then perhaps the slingshot can pull Holleran toward the core. So the General escalates Operation Precept by forming a new trio: Major Leroy Hanlon, Captain Paulie Rosso, and Specialist Dick Holleran. Dick Holleran names his power the Shine, but in Stephen King's larger tapestry, it's the same current that surfaces as the touch, second sight, or plain old knowing. A spectrum of psychic perception that runs in bloodlines, burns brightest in children, and behaves like a signal through static. Dick's gift clusters around sending and receiving. Mind-to-mind speech, reading places and objects saturated with emotion like the overlooked shine prints, and a danger sense that spikes when violence gathers. The shine is costly. Crowds and trauma fuzz the signal. Predatory forces notice intense output, and consent matters. That's why Holleran treats minds like houses with locks, and why his most practical power is restraint. Later formalized into lockboxes, he teaches Dan Torrance to build in Dr. Sleep. Mental coffers that starve intruding entities instead of feeding them attention.
My grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining. You know, Doc, when something happens, it can leave a trace of itself behind.
Across King's universe, Holleran's gift is one facet of a shared physics. The Overlook and Derry operate like batteries, where human suffering becomes an amplifier. The True Knot in Dr. Sleep literalizes predators who feed on steam, the burn-off of potent shiners. The Institute weaponizes abducted telepaths. The Dark Tower recasts high-grade shiners as breakers used to pry at the beams. Always, the moral geometry is the same. Institutions try to turn the shine vertical, to dominate, measure, and exploit, while survivors like Dick use it horizontally, to connect, guide, and carry. That's why his presence in Derry reads as both instrument and warning. Objects hold charge, belief shapes bandwidth, and attention is food. Shine used to bind people together, Danny to Dick, losers to each other, Dan to Abra, blunts the deadlights entropy. Shine, bent into a program, lights a beacon the darkness is happy to answer.
My grandmama said it's like seeing things without seeing things.
As the helicopter takes off, Dick reaches for the object, and more precisely, for the memory it holds. Then the Shine does what it does. His body goes slack while his mind falls. In the black inner chamber that Derry pretends isn't there, he arrives into the sewers, into the smell of rotten metal, toward Pennywise's lair. The production leans hard into iconography here. A circus wagon labeled Pennywise, a space full of floaters, the bodies of its victims turning in lazy orbits in the deadlights, and that lethal orange radiance. In King's cosmology, those lights belong to Tadash Space and the Crimson King's toolkit. Here they curl out of the darkness as proof that Precept is out of its depth and still digging. Unfortunately, Pennywise notices the looker and contact is made both ways.
Who are you?
Purrs a voice from the dark, a taunt and an invitation. Dick swallows back fear and then he sees his grandmother Rose, the woman who named his Shine, who taught him the mental lockboxes he'll later pass to Danny Torrance. Is she truly trapped in the deadlights? Probably not. More likely, Pennywise is remixing Holleran's strongest protection into a lure, but as a story beat, it's bridging the Shining and Dr. Sleep's inner defenses to the clown's outer brutality, reminding us that Dick's Shine is not a gadget Precept can point without a cost. In the helicopter, the vision registers as a seizure to the pilots who have no idea what's going on. As Dick tries to open the door in his vision and escape, in reality he moves like a man who isn't in his body and begins opening the door on the helicopter instead. Leroy doesn't hesitate. He moves and hauls him back to safety as Paulie closes the door. When they land, there's no declaration of victory. In fact, Holleran tells the general that perhaps they should stop what they're doing now that it is aware of them. Of course, the general shrugs it off, but not before agreeing to help Dick set up a place the black soldiers can go to. This will likely end up being the black spot from the novel, which will eventually get burned down. The town's indigenous community isn't happy about the military digging up places that shouldn't be disturbed. Rose, not Holleran's grandmother, but the girl Francis befriended, now the proprietor of Secondhand Rose Secondhand Clothes, warns her nephew Taniel and his friends to stay clear of Shaw's excavation. "We need you," she says. It's not empty rhetoric. The series is threading a line begun in the films. Chapter 2's contested ritual of Chudnod, the old tribe's warnings, into a Derry where native voices are both spectators to and stakeholders in what the base is doing. Ogic, the actor playing Taniel, is a neat extra textual wink for constant readers. He last popped up in the Long Walk adaptation pipeline, and Rose carries the other half of that cold open. She was the girl with the slingshot. Memory, who keeps it, who loses it, who chooses to hold it, becomes the community's quiet superpower. Interestingly, Rose suggests the community start with a cease and desist letter, giving the military time to respond before filing a formal complaint that the burial grounds are being unearthed. When told this would be ineffective at stopping them from digging by a nephew, she admits she doesn't want them to stop but to continue to find out what they're really after. The dig can't proceed as a simple engineering problem because the ground isn't empty. It's a cemetery without headstones. That's why Shaw, now General Francis Shaw, walks into Secondhand Rose to court the woman who knew him before he learned to salute. He tells her with a wince of honesty that he'd almost forgotten about her. He'd almost forgotten about this place. The show lets her face say what her words don't. Of course he did.
It's the oddest thing. Before I got here, I didn't remember you at all.
Some would say it's for the best.
He brings an olive branch. The base wants to dig, but the local native community is furious about unmarked graves and desecrated sites. "Help us draw the lines," he says. "We're just doing soil surveys for a municipal water project. You can trust me." He lands the lie softly. Rose answers with 2 words to keep the door open while making no concession at all. "No promises," she says, meaning there are places where your machines make more than holes. They make doors. With the kids regrouping at the standpipe and realizing the creature takes the shape of deceased family members to scare them, Rich claims they're dealing with an evil spirit, something his uncle, a Santeria priest in Cuba, would tell him about. Explaining there was a ritual he would use at a cemetery to conjure them, they decide to give it a go themselves.
and the really mean ones always took form of their dead ancestors.
The debrief between Leroy and Dick Halloran happens around Charlotte Hanlon's dinner table. Charlotte cooks, glasses clink, and it's revealed that she struggled to find a job here in Derry as there are no teaching posts available. The scene is performing 2 jobs at once. It lets you exhale with them, and it sets up the boundary drawing that follows. When Charlotte leaves, Halloran asks Leroy where his son was, and is told that he's at a friend's place, but that he'll meet him sometime. It's not until the men go outside to the porch with 2 beers that Leroy jumps right to the chase, noting that he never mentioned he had a son to Dick. He tells Halloran that he was in his head at dinner, explaining that he felt it only once before when he was attacked in the barracks during the loyalty test.
Stay out of my head.
Dick doesn't posture. You don't have to worry about that, he answers, and tells Leroy what he saw when he brushed the Major's mind that night. Where other men's thoughts scream and plead when death is stepping over the threshold, Leroy's didn't.
It's like the part of your brain that's supposed to be afraid, it's not even there.
Then the line that cements the Foxhole Treaty. So, you're not the kind of fella I'm likely to fuck with, Major. But you saved my life up in that bird, so I sure wouldn't mind having you with me in them trenches. The exchange is a pact. Dick is a rebel who leverages the few privileges the base grudgingly affords him to secure his fellow Black Airmen a place to unwind that won't throw them out. And he lights up when he learns Charlotte was making signs and sitting where she wasn't wanted, down south. Leroy is a devoted husband and father who also happens to be the one man on base whose amygdala damage makes him useful to a general hunting fear. 2 men with reasons not to trust anyone choose to trust each other a little. That evening, Rich, Will, Lily, and Ronnie gather at the cemetery and prepare for the ritual. But when Rich admits that it wasn't his uncle, but his cousin that told him about how to summon evil spirits, Ronnie and Lily decide to split. It doesn't help that Will tells Ronnie that he doesn't believe she saw apparitions, merely that she believes she saw them. It's not until they try leaving the cemetery that Pennywise responds by splitting the earth and summoning the dead children to taunt them. Despite dropping the camera a few times on their way out, they manage to take a few shots of the things tormenting them, including one of Pennywise himself in a crypt. If you're going to show adults a picture a monster will try to erase, you don't go to a drugstore photo mat, and so the kids break into the school and develop the photos themselves. Everything goes fine, and ominously, the last one reveals the image of Pennywise.
It's a clown.
Now you see it doesn't sprint for a conventional cliffhanger. It builds a pressure system. On one side, a state program, Operation Precept, that insists terror can be scoped, mapped, and packaged as a weapon. On the other, 4 children who just prove that the thing in the dark can be dragged onto paper if you're brave, fast, and lucky. In between, Derry's civic machinery, cops, courts, committees, keep running interference for the monster by doing what bureaucracy does best. What the kids are about to learn the hard way is that, in Derry, the adults will likely not be able to see what they see anyway. The base will still say we can use this, the thing under the town will keep feeding, and the children, who just taught themselves how to make evidence in a town built to ignore it, will have to decide what to do next when no one else can see the picture they risk their lives to take. While it does its best to maintain the mythology and expand on it, Episode 3 is a major step down from the premiere episode. There's a lot of Scooby-Doo shenanigans at the end that robs Pennywise of the menace we've come to expect from the clown, and the fact that the military is aware of the creature while the rest of the town is oblivious raises a lot more questions that the rest of the season will have a hard time answering.
He's coming, Dickie. Get out of here now.